On level 10, girls play and converse while preparing for bed. Vivien and Sophie talk about what they'll do when they're with their family. A light flashes, and they make their way to a basin in the hall. They line up and wait their turn to apply face cream while a camera watches them. They have to be prompt, otherwise they're punished. Sophie drops her cream, and when she can't see it, she calls out for Vivien's help. Vivien comes to Sophie's rescue and misses her turn. The light turns red as Vivien hastily gets to the basin and applies the cream. But it's too late. The girls turn to face the walls as the guards come to take Vivien away. She begs them not to take her. A few years later, the girls are now on level 15. They're in a class where they answer questions posed by a pre-recorded video. The video freezes, and the girls question if they should report it or go back to their room. Vivien tells them to remain in place and wait for the buzzer to tell them what to do. The video corrects itself, and they finish the tape. That night before bed, Vivien creates a notch in her headboard, tallying the days. The following day, they await the arrival of Miss Brixel. She enters the room and tells the girls they're progressing to level 16. She tells the girls that it'll be their final year at Vestalis before meeting their new families. Vivien, Rita, and Ava are told they're moving up to Rose Hall. On level 16, the girls make their way to Rose Hall, led by Vivien. They meet their new roommates, and Vivien finds out that one of them is Sophie. Vivien ignores Sophie. After vitamins and dinner, Vivien goes to the toilets and sits alone for a moment. When she opens the door, Sophie's there, wanting to talk to her. Vivien initially dismisses her, but Sophie brings up the level 10 incident and tries to apologize. The buzzer goes off and the girls run to the assembly. Miss Brixel arrives and tells the girls that it's time to train them to dress and behave in a way that fits their upcoming adoptive families. She gives them dresses to wear the next day while they do their chores and go to sleep. That night, the girls admire their dresses. Then a light interrupts them, telling them to go to bed. Vivien in bed takes out her clip to tally the days out of habit. Ava interrupts her and tells Vivien that she'll get the best placement, making Vivien smile. As everyone sleeps, Sophie sits up and looks at them. The following day, the girls wear their dresses. Sophie finds Vivien doing some washing and asks the other girl if they can switch duties. Sophie looks around and tells Vivien that she has to tell her something. Vivien attempts to ignore her, but Sophie tells her not to take the vitamins. Before Vivien can question it, Ava walks in and tells Vivien she needs her help changing sheets. Vivien's turn is up. Cinema recap here. We've got a little challenge that'll take 5 seconds, and it will change your life forever. You ready? All you gotta do is like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and you'll receive 10 free years of good luck. It's as simple as that. She pretends to take the vitamin before going to the toilet, spitting it up and flushing it down. That night, the girls get into bed in their dresses. Vivien tries to say goodnight to Ava, but realizes that all the girls are fast asleep already. She creates the tally in the headboard and looks out at the girls before calling out to Ava. Sophie gets up, walks over to Vivien, and tells her that Ava won't get up because the vitamins keep them asleep. Vivien argues that the vitamins are to protect the girls. Sophie tells Ava to pretend she's asleep if the guards come, but Vivien's confused, telling Sophie the guards aren't allowed in the room. They both hear a noise, and Sophie runs back to her bed quickly. They both pretend to be fast asleep. Miss Brixel and 2 guards walk in, and she chooses 2 girls, which the guard picks up and takes. As she leaves and the door closes, Sophie sits up and realizes that one of the girls they took was Vivien. Vivien pretends to be asleep as the guards bring the 2 girls to a room and place them down. As the door closes, Vivien opens her eyes and sees the room they're in. She tries to wake Olivia but is unsuccessful. The door opens, and Vivien quickly pretends to be asleep as Miss Brixel walks in with an older couple. The man inspects the girls while his wife goes and looks at herself in the mirror. The couple argue as the husband tells his wife that they've come all this way and taken a risk being at Vestalis. Miss Brixel walks back in and asks if they want to see other options, but the woman says no, they'll take Olivia. She tells her husband to pay them. They bring back Vivien and take another girl. Sophie gets up and runs over to Vivien, who realizes that they aren't going to be adopted. They're going to be bought. Sophie tries to explain that they need to get out of there and tells Vivien they need to get outside. Vivien tells Sophie she's crazy and that the air is poisonous outside. Sophie tries to explain but hears a noise and quickly runs back to her bed. Miss Brixel walks in and takes new girls, including Sophie. Vivien gets out of bed and goes to the door. She opens it and walks out into the halls of level 16. She runs, trying to avoid cameras. Vivien hears the door opening and hides. Miss Brixel walks in and takes a phone call. As Miss Brixel leaves again, Vivien attempts to get out the same door but doesn't have the key card. The camera records her efforts. As Vivien hears someone returning, she runs back to the room and to her bed. The guard returns Sophie, who tells Vivien it's locked now and that was their only chance. The girls are sent to see Dr. Miro for vaccinations against various diseases. He gives Vivien the shot before asking her a few questions about her skin. She tells him she's never had pimples or dry skin, which pleases him. Vivien tells him about a problem she has with sleep scabs. He asks her to show him, and she reveals a red patch on her lower back. He rubs some cream on the sore. That night, Vivien goes to speak to Sophie. She asks why all of a sudden they got blue pills. The white ones make them sleep, but the blue ones knock them out. Sophie tells Vivien that they also never had party dresses before, all because the patrons came to see them in person. Sophie tells Vivien that she's waited since level 13 for the door to be left unlocked, and it's never happened until that night. Vivien asks what Sophie does at night. She tells Vivien that she falls asleep eventually. She hears the halls go about their days, all happening at different times. There's only one dead quiet hour. Vivien says if they go during that hour, the other girls won't see them. Sophie tells her that it's impossible because of the cameras, but Vivien argues that the other night she was in the halls, in front of the cameras, and nothing happened. Vivien tells her that she made it to the door but couldn't get out, and she thinks it's because of the shiny cards. Sophie says they should tell the other girls, but Vivien disagrees. The following day, Veronica has a fit and starts throwing up. Vivien takes Veronica to help her clean up. Sophie waits outside, and when Veronica comes out, she rubs her arm, where they got the shots. Sophie asks to see and notices red marks all over her. She goes to Vivien, and they see they have the same marks. When Vivien suggests that they can ask the doctor for help, Sophie asks if she actually trusts him, and Vivien weakly says no. Sophie tells Vivien about the guard with the limp who comes in while they're drugged and abuses the girls. They're interrupted by a buzzer for class. Dr. Miro tells Vivien she's getting another vaccine, and when she questions him, he snaps at her. Miro asks if she's been taking her vitamins, and she tells him she has. He says her behavior requires him to give her a concentrated vitamin shot, and says he won't call the guards for punishment because she deserves a second chance. He asks her what the first virtue is, and she says obedience. As she puts out her arm, Vivien, drugged, struggles to walk properly. Sophie finds Vivien and reveals that she has a plan. Sophie says they need a card, which the guards have. Vivien gets louder as she objects. Ava watches before going to a phone and reporting Vivien to Miss Brixel. Vivien and Sophie mop the floors of their room. They devise a plan to wait for the guard with the limp to come and abuse the girls. Then they'll get his card somehow. They're called for an assembly, where Miss Brixel comes in and takes Vivien for impure behavior. She takes Vivien and tells her to go into a small room for punishment or be taken downstairs. Vivien gets in the box and is told to focus on the virtues. Brixel goes to her residence, where she grabs a drink and listens to music. Miro walks in and holds Brixel from behind. She tells him she's worried about Alex. When Miro says Alex's uncle isn't easy to deal with, Brixel says she never wanted to deal with any of them. Miro argues that they protect them and bring them customers. Dr. Miro says they want the couple to restock, but Brixel says he promised her only 3 more years. He argues that they don't have to be children this time. They can start later, at age 12. The two argue. Brixel says they're barely holding it together as it is, but Miro tells her they're dangerous people. Brixel says Miro wasted time and money creating classes, but he argues that it helped them make them docile by level 10. Brixel says it hasn't worked on Vivien, and Miro agrees she's an unusual case. Vivien spends the night in the box while Sophie makes rope in her bed. She's interrupted when the guard with the limp pays the room a visit. He begins to touch one of the girls, but Sophie wraps the rope around his neck and tries to strangle him. She makes a run for it before going back for Vivien. The guard jumps out of the room and tries to grab Sophie. She runs into the washing room, and he grabs her and strangles her. He punches her to the floor. She sees the iron, and as he's coming in closer to see if she's out, she takes the iron and hits him. She grabs that card and runs to Vivien. He wakes up moments later. Sophie gets to Vivien and is about to let her out when the alarm goes off. Vivien tells Sophie not to leave, but she tells Vivien to trust her. The following day, Vivien is led out and taken to an assembly. Brixel tells them that Sophie stole something but doesn't have it, implying that she gave it to the other girls. Brixel tells whoever has the item to come forward, but nobody does. Miro then takes over and tells the guard to take one of the girls, telling them that every day someone will be punished until the item is returned. On his way out, Miro gives Brixel the pills and leaves. Brixel goes to the girls and watches them take the pills. She makes Vivien lift her tongue to ensure that she actually took the pill. At night, she tries to stay awake. She starts looking for the card and then realizes she knows where Sophie might have put it. She manages to find the card on top of her hiding spot. Vivien attempts to use the card to leave but is unsuccessful. She bangs on the door before sliding down to the floor. She sees the hinges and uses the card to remove the screws one at a time. Vivien walks down the halls towards Brixel's office. Hearing the noise, she quickly grabs a syringe and fills it with a sedative before telling whoever is on the other side to come in. A drowsy Vivien wanders in, and Brixel tells her to sit, telling Vivien she can barely stand. Vivien calls her out and says it's because she's drugged her. Vivien asks where Sophie is, and Brixel's surprised to learn they're friends, since they have a way of preventing that kind of thing from happening. Vivien gets aggressive and demands to know where Sophie is, and Brixel waves the sedative in front of her. Brixel tells Vivien she's leaving, and that before she goes, she needs to give her a vitamin, and then she'll take her to Sophie. She launches herself at Vivien, who acts quickly, grabbing the lamp and hitting her. She gives Brixel the sedative before leaving. Vivien climbs the stairwell and sees the moon for the first time. She's about to leave, but decides to go and find Sophie first. On the bottom floor, she finds Sophie and goes and unties her, but realizes they need something to cut the cable ties. They walk into a room, and when she's free, they look around and find Rita in a body bag, skinned. Vivien says they need to leave, and quickly. Sophie argues that they can't go and let the other girls meet the same fate. Vivien tells her it's impossible. There's only 2 of them. But Sophie says she has to try. As they get to the roof, where they're meant to part ways, Vivien tries to convince Sophie to come with her. Sophie tells her that she turned her back on a friend once because she was taught to be afraid. She's no longer afraid, and with that, she leaves. She goes to level 16 and interrupts one of the hall's classes. She tells them that Brixel sent her, and they need to go on an assignment. Vivien waits at the top of the stairs and hears the guard with the limp walking up. Worried about Sophie, she goes after him. She walks down a hall she's never seen before, and as the guard approaches, she hides quickly. She looks around and walks into the room where they were looked at by the buyers. Vivien comes across a TV that explains that Miro and Brixel offer a service where they take the faces of young girls to rejuvenate older women's faces. Vivien angrily slams on the television before looking at her arm where the vaccine was injected. The girls ask Sophie where Miss Brixel is, and she says she's going to explain, but they need to leave. Sophie tries to tell the girls that this isn't a school, it's a prison, and they need to get out now. The girls all start asking questions and say they should call the guards. Vivien tells them it's a bad idea. She walks in with Miss Brixel as her captive. She tells them to be quiet. She tells them that this isn't a school or a prison. It's a farm where they're raised for their skin. The girls don't believe them, but when Vivien and Sophie tell them about Rita, they wonder if they're next. Vivien tells Brixel to confirm what she's saying. She tells them it's too late. They realize that she's wearing a girl's face herself. They take her and lock her in the cell. They go up to the roof. Ava opens the door, setting off the alarm. They all start running out. The guard with the limp grabs Sophie. Vivien fights back, brandishing a blade at him. He knocks her out of the way and goes for Sophie again. Vivien manages to hit him with the broom before he falls off the roof and dies. Vivien helps Sophie, who's been stabbed, and they get to the others. They all start running as one of the guards chases after them. Soon, more guards show up. Vivien and Sophie get to a room and lock themselves inside. Miro comes and tries to talk to him. Vivien tells Miro that she knows everything, and he attempts to gaslight her. He tells Vivien that he saved them from poverty. He tries to convince her to help them get the other girls back. She asks how much her face is really worth. He tells her he invested 16 years of his life for her face. So she takes the blade and cuts her face as he tries to stop her. Miro walks away from the door and the 2 men tell the doctor that Alex wants to see him. He says he can fix this and tells the guys to just handle the authorities. They tell him that Alex doesn't wait for anyone. The girls hear a gunshot. Morning comes, and the police officers break the barricades to the door. She calls out for the paramedics and guides the girls out. They see the sun for the first time and feel the rain on their skin. Level 16 was released in 2018 by Dark Sky Films. It starred Katie Douglas, Celina Martin, and Sara Canning. Would you do anything if it meant looking young forever? Tell me with the hashtag Cinema Recap in the comments.